Hey everyone, I'm Melanie Huronka and I am going to talk about planning educational research. That's chapter 3 in Cohen's book, Research Methods in Education. These are what we are going to talk about. First is the introduction and the framework for planning research, followed by a planning matrix for research, managing the planning of research, a worked example, and lastly, the conclusion. Let's start out with the introduction. So according to the book, there is no single blueprint for planning research because research design is governed by the notion of fitness for purpose. If we do not know the purpose of our research, we won't be able to determine the methodology and the design of the research that we are going to conduct. Is to identify a set of issues that researchers need to address regardless of the specifics of the research. Therefore, this chapter addresses this set of issues to indicate those matters that need to be addressed in practice so that an area of research interest can become practicable and feasible. It also indicates how research might be operationalized, that is, how a general set of research aims and purposes can be translated into a practical, researchable topic. So interestingly, we are going to talk about that in the framework. In planning of research, there are two phases, the divergent phase and the convergent phase. Let's start with talking about divergent phase. When we are in the divergent phase, this means that there will be a range of possible options for the researcher, therefore the beginning of the research. And after that, after the researcher identifies a range of options and possibilities, we will now move to the convergent phase, wherein those range of possibilities or the possible options will now be sifted or will be sieved, will be chosen through possibilities, which will be answering the questions which one will actually work in the situation and move towards an action plan that can realistically operate. So this can be approached through the establishment of a framework of a planning or a framework for planning research. That is our second topic. Of course, we are aiming for organization so that our research will be strategic, that will be tactical, and we won't go wrong when we are now to conduct our research. So that's why planning is already a process, a long process, so that everything that will follow will be in order. So according to Morrison in 1993, the issues that we identify right from the beginning of our research can be arranged into four main areas. First, orienting decisions, research design and methodology, data analysis, presenting and reporting the result. And I'd like to show you guys the questions that we could ask when we are in the first area of the arrangement of issues. So when we say orienting decisions, these are decisions which set the boundaries or the constraints on the research. Let's say the research has to be completed within 6 months. So that means everything in the research will have to be affected because of the duration of the research. And if we are going to talk about time, we are also going to adjust our participant or whatever is on the enterprise. So these are the questions that we could ask so that we could be well informed and we could be well aware of our decision. Yeah, these questions are answerable by answering who or what, is it realistic or not. It also includes questions about the timeframes of the research. Okay, not only the participants or for whom the research is, but also who will be owning the data and the ethical issues that the researcher will face and the resources that are required for the research. Those are the questions that we could ask when we are in this area of arranging our issue. Saying that, it can be seen that decisions here establish some key parameters of the research, including political decisions, let's say on ownership and on the power of the recipients to take action on the basis of the research. So at this stage of planning in the framework of the research, feasibility of the research will be addressed. Now that we are already done with identifying for whom the research is, or the timescales, or ethical issues, we will now go to the research design and methodology. If we are able to successfully put the questions in orienting decisions tactically, that means that we could establish the practicalities of the research, assuming that our research is feasible. So here are some questions that we could include addressing the decisions that we have to make. You could just pause. But in totality, these questions would ask about the purposes of the research, if the research questions are operationalized, and mainly about the research question. And after that, talking about the research questions, we are now going to also talk about operationalizing research questions. How are we going to create research questions? Sometimes we are bound to ask questions that are not really related to our research, or just making the research topic broader instead of making the research topic more narrow. Here are some tips in order for us to operationalize research questions. So when we say operationalization, this means that we are specifying a set of operations or behaviors that can be measured, addressed, or manipulated. That means you have to specify a set of operations that can be measured. So how are we going to measure them? So we have to establish a set of ways on how to measure. So how are we going to do that? We could translate our research aims or purpose into specific concrete questions to which specific concrete answers can be given. Also, the researcher should break down its general research purpose or general aim into more specific research purposes and constituent elements, continuing the process until specific concrete questions have been reached to which specific answers can be provided, and move the research from simply an expression of interest, or we could say a general aim, into a series of issues that lend themselves to being investigated in concrete terms. That means we move from the general to the specific, or from the abstract to the concrete. So the question actually related to operationalizing research questions, the continuity of the research that we are going to conduct. After we are able to establish our research question and our purposes are now specific and narrowed down, we also know our aim. We are now going to distinguish methods from methodology. So sometimes we interchange these two. Sometimes we answer what method will I be using into the kind of research that we are going to undertake. So it's also important to clarify the distinction between the two. So when we say method, that means the decision on which instrument we are going to use. On the other hand, when we say methodology, that is after we are able to know the method and methodology to use, we are now going to proceed to the data analysis. Or once we get our data, we are now going to prepare how to analyze the data that we were able to gather. Also, this is important because it has bearing on the form of the instrumentation that we are going to use. It is just important to know the need to consider. Okay, let's say what needs to be done with the data when they have been collected, or how will they be processed and analyzed. Questions that will also tell the researcher or tell us how we are going to analyze the data that we were able to gather. So I think you are now answering the question right in your mind, because I believe that we have already done this and we have already used these. And the second question will be, how will the results of the analysis be verified, cross-checked, and validated? So examples of this would be the SPSS and Vivo. So here are, guys, some ways in analyzing data. So now that we are able to analyze our data on whatever suitable data analysis instrument we use, now we are going to present and report the results of our research. So in this part of the book, it also says at the stage of planning data analysis, we also, not only do we need to prepare in analyzing the data that we gather, but we should also consider the form of the reporting of the research and its results. That is depending to the audience to whom we are going to report or present the result. So here are the things that we should consider when we are presenting and reporting the result. Now that we are able to understand what to do in the following stages of the planning, and we also have our working framework, we are now going to proceed to the next topic, making a matrix for research. When we talk about matrix for research, this way it would be easier and will be more organized when we put it out. We have four main areas. We have orienting decisions, research design, and methodology. So we have the columns here. We have the questions, like the questions I presented at the beginning part of the presentation. We also have the second column, that is sub-issues and problems. Okay, so this time we are narrowing it down to certain information in the form of questions, and then the decisions, that is how are we going to set out the sub-issues and problems and the questions into our answer. These questions are going to definitely give us answers on what to do. So that's why it's called the decisions column. So you will see it there. Let's say, for example, questions 1 to 10 are for the orienting decisions question, is about research design methodology. Let's say 23 down to 24 would be about data analysis, and 25 to 30 would be questions about presenting and reporting the result. You see, guys, through the matrix, we are now answering questions and narrowing down our issues or problems into more organized and specific way of planning our research. For the decisions, not only are we going to just give out questions and answers, but also we have to follow standard, get to see how well the decision in with the decisions in regard to other issues and questions. Of course, the questions or the decisions should not contradict each other. And so let me just show you the standard or the reminders that we have to also remember when we are making the matrix. These decisions or the things that we are going to do are going to be contradicting with each other. So we have to go back to the other answers under decisions column as we answer the questions under the first column. The questions to solve issues and problems and decisions go on. But in essence, not all of the planned possibilities might be practicable when the four criteria are applied, because it would be of very little use if the methods of data collection listed in the decisions column could also offer little opportunity to fulfill the needs of acquiring information to answer the other questions. We already know our research questions. We are clear of what issues to study, and we also have a clear perspective of our research questions, our purposes and aim, our framework into a matrix. This time we are going to manage the planning of research. So just remember, guys, using matrix is useful for exposing key features of the planning of research. With managing the planning of research, the first topics that we talked about, we saw complexities there, and we could say that planning a piece of research is already complex. We're just talking about planning, but we should not assume that research will always go according to plan. Sometimes it just doesn't go our way. Yeah, we have to admit it happens. I'm going to show you another set of diagrams to manage the complexity, anticipate what needs to be anticipated. We need to follow a simple four-stage model. We could manage the complexity in planning our research. Each stage contains several operations, right? If you could see here, there are questions accompanying each stages. So it is useful for research planners or for us researchers to consider which instruments will be used at which stage of the research and with which sectors of the sample population. Not only could we ask questions, we could be also clear, we would be knowing what research design it is going to be for our research. We could also create a matrix for our research, so you will see there the stages as well. The matrix approach could enable us to see at a glance the coverage of the sample and of the instruments used at particular point in time, making admissions clear and promoting which questions, just like the questions that we were able to ask earlier. When we use matrix, again, it is also going to tell us about the timing of the identification of the sample. So you will also see it there. Or the timing of pre-test and post-test if we are going to conduct so, and the timing of intensive necessary resource support, and the timing of meetings or of interested parties. The matrix would only show us about the timing, or we could also develop a matrix to cover other combinations, let's say reporting by audiences, or we could also create a matrix for research team meetings by reporting, and we could also create a matrix for instrumentation by participants or others. Okay, not only could we create a matrix, but could also create other ways for us to identify or just to present in a clear manner about whatever component of the research we are going to conduct, be it the timing, be it reporting, be it our research design, be it our research questions. Those are the critical parts of planning for research. So again, just to recap, we were able to talk about the framework for planning research, and then we were also able to talk about the planning matrix for research and managing the planning of research. And I would suggest not to forget the four main areas for us to arrange. In this part of the chapter, we are going to talk about a sample study, and we're going to look at how purposes, how research questions are laid, the focus methodology, instrumentation, and the sampling, the stages in the research, the timeframes, and all. Okay, so let us start by knowing the situation. So the purpose will be to present an overall and in-depth picture of the organizational culture or cultures and subcultures, including the prevailing cultures and subcultures within the school. Second is to provide an indication of the strength of the organizational cultures. And third is to make suggestions and recommendations about the organizational culture of and its development at the school. If you will see, guys, there is a key term that is being repeated. So the purpose just goes around the topic. Where are the research questions established? So again, the research questions would identify which research design or methods and methodology we are going to use. So looking at these research questions, we would be able to identify what instrument we are going to use for the research. So the focus of the research will be the three levels of organizational cultures. So we have the underlying values and assumptions, espoused values, and enacted behaviors in artifacts. Looking at the methodology of the research, it used a mixed methodology, which will be used for the empirical data collection. It will use numerical and verbal data in order to gather rounded, reliable data. A survey approach will be used to gain an overall picture, and a more fine-grained analysis will be achieved through individual and group interviews and focus groups. So given the research questions and the methodology that is presented there, what do you think are the instruments that will be used in the research? Not only is it a survey approach, again, it's a mixed method. The research question. There's a lot of questions, but yeah. So here we go. First is the researcher use questionnaire. Second is semi-structured interviews. So with the presentation of the instrumentation, we could also classify which one would support quantitative and which one would support qualitative. Observational data, and we also have the documentary data. The research or the sample that we used will also presented the sampling. So nominal characteristics of the sampling will be included, for example, age. And we also have the stages into research. First, the development and operationalization, instrumentation and the piloting of the instruments, data collection, data analysis, interpretation, and reporting. The research also indicated the copies of the report will be available for all the employees. Talking about ethics and ownership, data once given to the researcher are his or hers, and the researcher may not use them in any way which will publicly identify the school. The report is a property of time frame. So the first month for a review of the relevant literature, second month, again, we only have 5 months according to the situation. The second month to develop the instrumentation and research the science, the third month to gather the data, the fourth month to analyze the data, and the fifth month to complete the report. We are now bound to our conclusion. Okay, this is the last part of chapter 3. The notion of fitness for purpose, just like what I told you earlier as we began, again, there's no blueprint when we plan for research, okay, because it depends on our purpose. The notion of fitness for purpose reigns in planning research. The research plan must suit the purposes of the research. If the reader is left feeling at the end of this chapter the task of research is complex, then that is an important message. That is, for rigor and thoughtful, thorough planning are necessary if the research is to be worthwhile and effective. Part of the chapter really struck me. When I read the chapter, it really left me thinking that planning research is a complex process. But again, the chapter would also let you understand that it would be easy if we could also follow the certain steps given to us, or the tips that were given to us, or the way that we could create, let's say, a matrix or a framework in an organized and systematic manner. So just gonna have to think it through, got to plan, because at the end of the day, all we want is a worthwhile research, right? An effective research. That's what our professors would always tell us. Your research must serve something. Your research must have a purpose, because if not, then what is the purpose of you studying and spending money? Oh yeah, we are going to spend money when it comes to research. One thing that is also important is starting off to plan our research correctly, and then everything will follow. I hope you guys learned a thing from my report, and all of us would also create, again, a worthwhile and effective research. So this is Melanie Haranka, and thank you so much for listening and watching.